All right, UFC Fight Night. It was a great card. There's quite a bit of interesting grapple tactics to talk about. There was some awesome striking. I have to say I'm starting to appreciate it more and more, even though grappling is my main thing. There was a lot of action on the ground as well as on the feet. But let's talk about the grapple tactics. There was a lot to talk about, especially in the first three fights of the main card. Let's start with Kamaka versus Brown. I think the first thing you're going to remember, or the biggest thing you're going to remember, is Brown going for Kimuras. He was on his back. He had full closed guard on Kamaka, and he starts reaching for the arm, and he gets the wrist behind the back, and he tries to finish it. But Kamaka's a strong dude, starts to stretch the arm, and it wasn't working out. Like there was no follow through. He was just trying to finish it from a very bad position. I think most of us have heard the story of Marcelo Garcia saying, I don't go for Kimuras because they're really hard to finish on big guys. And I think this is an example of somebody of equal size even, but it's really hard to finish that Kimura just because that stretch the arm defense. They're still stuck in a position if they don't roll, but they're not that big of a danger if you can't keep the arm bent, right? Keeping the arm bent is a big part of it. Which is why I'm surprised I'm not seeing power Kimuras more often. I think that's what they're called. It's the one where you hug your own arm, and it really makes it near impossible for the defender to stretch their arm. There's a couple of videos on YouTube of Satoshi Ishii showing how he does that, and Neil Melanson is also a big proponent of the power Kimura grip variation. I'd like to see some of that. I'd like to see somebody try that out and see if it's going to give them any more success. It also it really hurts your forearm because Neil Melanson calls it the ice pick. You're using your forearm bone to dig into the meat of the other guy, and it really, really hurts. And what else is MMA if not trying to hurt the other person, right? So I would love to see somebody try that out. There was also some other things I was thinking about. Maybe go for a Kimura roll, right? If you're on your back and you've got the Kimura grip, if you just swing your hips around and you go almost put yourself in north-south, you can try to sweep the person over. If they sit back on their weight, you can try to roll back and try to take their back. This is very much a grappling thing. I'm a grappler, so that's how I look at it, right? I'm not saying these things would be easy to do. It's just I feel like there's room to put some of these more traditional grappling things into MMA. So Brown showed some really good ability to stand up. Like he was on his back, he had a full guard, but he's not like how Kevin Holland was fighting a while back. He wasn't staying there. Once he tried the Kimura, it failed. He was able to stand back up, and his striking was pretty good. And the way he stood up was interesting because it's similar to how he would reach for the arm to go for the Kimura. He would just, with the cross grip, grab the wrist and stand up. And controlling that one hand made it impossible for Kamaka to keep him down because you can't keep a grown-ass man down with just one arm, right? So that was an awesome way of getting up. And you saw other fighters do the similar techniques during the rest of the evening. You also saw Kamaka Brown had a De La Riva hook at some point. He tried to attack the leg, but Kamaka defended really well by putting his hips back and his knees to the ground. He wasn't able to do any leg attacks. And really, Brown looked gassed after that and really made me wonder, like, is playing off your back with somebody putting pressure on you that much more exhausting than playing a top game? If so, it kind of puts the grappler in a bad situation where going to their mainstay, doing what they're supposed to be able to do best, is actually going to cost them more energy than the top guy. Maybe bottom play, guard play in MMA just has had its day. The best days of that style of fighting are gone. It's a big statement to make, but it makes you wonder. Now on to the other fight, Marcos versus Pinero. Now Pinero was a judo player. You heard the announcer say it. I'm not familiar with this fighter, but they were saying judo, judo, judo over and over. And so I wasn't surprised when right off the bat you see an over-under grip transition beautifully into a head and arm throw. Right? We saw this a couple of fights ago where this female fighter called Conejo, was doing head and arm throws for days, and this was similar. Like, she was ragdolling Marcos in this fight, and the way she did the head and arm throw, I thought was really interesting, because she was bum rushed by Marcos. Marcos comes in swinging really bad. She throws a counter shot, but they end up clinched against the fence. Now, what Pinero did, she had an over-under grip. She had one overhook and one underhook. Now, from this position, she circled towards the side of the underhook as though she's trying to switch around and pin the other person against the fence, right? She's trying to move out of the way off the fence, and then right away the overhook hand turns into a club and just clubs Marcos on the back of the head, and uses the underhook to control the arm and head and arm throw down to the ground. Now, one of the big risks that you take when you're doing some of these big amplitude throws, these judo throws, is the risk of a roll through, right? So if the opponent just doesn't resist the throw so much, but they go with the motion, they can pull you over the top of their body and end up inside control. So the person taking the initiative can end up on the bottom. This is one of the big risks. You also hear John Danaher in his recent instructional on BJJ takedowns. He's saying, like, that's one of the things you have to choose, or you have to be aware of when you choose your takedowns in grappling, is make sure that you're minimizing the risk of roll through, because you won't get the points, right, if you're talking about IBJJF rules, and you end up in a terrible position. So this is not judo. In judo, as long as you get a big amplitude throw and they land on their back, you get points, right? You might score an ippon, it might be over right away, but that's not how submission grappling works, nor is it how MMA works. So what did Pinero do here, which I thought was amazing? She completely negated the risk of roll through. The way she did that was she just made her hips parallel to the floor, right? So after you do a head and arm throw, the side of your hips are pointed downwards, like the hip that's on the floor is basically committing your weight to keeping somebody in sort of like a scarf hold, kesagatame, right? Your hips are sideways. What she did, the moment that Marcos hit the floor, her hips went parallel, and she circled them around, and she ended up aligned in parallel, and she ended up inside of Marcos's closed guard. So closed guard may not be the best position to end up after a throw like that. You might want to end up in side control or anything that's outside of their legs. But considering this is MMA, right, being in somebody's full guard isn't that bad of a spot. Like, you can start landing strikes from there, you know, and especially if you end up with like one butterfly hook, like, that's still a pretty good place to start your passing game. So the way that Pinero used her judo, I think, was impressive. There were a lot of throws after this, and a lot of them had a similar setup where she started, I think it's more of a Kazushi off-balancing thing she does. She circles towards the side of the underhook and then switches directions right away, right? It's as though she's trying to misdirect the opponent by making this feint and then switching the direction, using her hips to block the other person's hip and throwing them over that. So there was, I guess you could call it a hip throw, head and arm throw, but the hip was in between sometimes, but not always. So it doesn't really matter exactly how clean the judo technique is. It's super effective. Now, I'm going to have trouble saying this name. Dvalishvili versus Cody Stamen. So it's pretty crazy. Like, everybody was talking about the cardio that Merab Dvalishvili had, and I think Bisping said, Merab, he's an animal, right? He's an animal, and it kind of looked that way. There was a lot of things said about the wrestling of both of these guys, and you could tell that their wrestling was really quite a fundamental part of this fight. Like, they were striking, but it was very wild and, in my opinion, not very technical. But then again, I am myself not a striking expert, so who am I to say? But the important thing, I think, here is that Merab he had a wild approach to this fight. Like he was, and I suppose in every fight, I guess that's just his style. He was using a lot of energy, and he was never standing still. So there was this moment where Stamen had a beautiful takedown. He pulled his hips, Merab's hips from underneath him, tried controlling him, and then Merab started just hammer fisting into his lat area, and then elbowing him in the side of the head and in the on the side of his back. And I was like, yeah, go, that you should do that, right? It's something that isn't really well defined in MMA. I would say. I think people like Kevin Holland, who are creative strikers, will find a way to punch you even though they're in a bad position or in a weird position on their back or on their hips, on the floor. They will find a way to hurt you. And obviously he knocked it wasn't Barboza who did. I forget who he knocked out, but off his back, his wild swing connected on somebody's temple and knocked them out. So I'm all about Merab. What Merab Dvalishvili was doing was just keep striking, even if you get taken down. Don't make it easy on the guy. Just keep punching, keep hitting, because they have to respect it. And you saw Stamen had to respect the strikes. Like there was no way that he could just stall in that position, because it was going to wear on him, and obviously it ended up opening up the possibilities to stand back up, and both of these guys were really, really hard to keep down, even though they were both wrestlers. Standing up, like stopping somebody from getting up off the ground, is not as easy as it sounds. You might think it's just a matter of putting your weight on them. Yeah, you try it. You try keeping a grown person of this equal size and weight. Try keeping them down. It's not that easy. And so we see people like Habib do this like it's nothing, right? But it's not easy. It takes a lot of skill. And I think what we saw was a lot of this technique that we see from Habib, body locking, and then mat returns, as they call them. We saw that in the Cutelaba versus Jacoby fight. Cutelaba, like the story of the fight is he gassed. He went all out in the first round and just doesn't have the cardio to get 3 rounds. Like imagine this guy in a title fight with 5 rounds. I don't know how he's going to do it. In any case, the first round, he on several occasions gets a body lock, right? And Jacoby turns his back, which I would say, like a lot of people say, don't turn your back, you got to keep him in front of you. I would say generally that's true, but it's also a technique to make sure that it buys you some time, I would say. I think if you have somebody in a body lock and they're facing you, if you pull their hips into you, you can make them bend over backwards, and it's pretty much impossible to stay standing when you're bending over backwards, right? So this is something that you want to avoid. And if you're late with the sprawl, if your hips aren't back enough, then turning and giving your back, which in this case would end up with you facing the same direction as the attacker, will give you some time to start fighting the hands. You can start to release the grip. In this case, that didn't work, right? Cutelaba was able to keep the body lock, and Jacoby wasn't able to break the grip. So when I saw that, and this was also something that was in the Merab versus Stamen fight, where this type of rear body lock situation also happened several times. I was thinking, once you've got this position, peeling off the hands sometimes looks easy and sometimes it doesn't. So I wonder, like, what does this have to do with the grip that they're using? Is this do people have different grips in this situation? And it came to my mind that I remember going to a seminar where Ben Eddy, the 10th Planet Black Belt, was giving a seminar. He was talking about the S grip, how it's one of the most versatile grips in grappling. Because if you do it well, your thumbs hide the side of your fingers, making it near impossible to peel open those fingers because they're hidden really well. So breaking this grip is near impossible. I was wondering, like, maybe Cutelaba was using an S grip. It was really hard to tell. I couldn't really see because they have the gloves on, and most of the time the hands are hidden away from where the camera is looking. So it wasn't easy for me to tell what type of grip he was using. but it did make me think that maybe S grip is the best, as opposed to something like a Gable grip, is a better grip. Maybe the S grip is better for rear body lock situations or any body lock situation. Well, it makes you wonder. So, in addition to the S grip, I was also thinking about how Kimura, when somebody's behind you, like you can try to swim your arm behind the elbow, or lock up your arms and get a Kimura grip. Like the chances of you finishing it from that position are really, really low. But I think we've all seen the videos on how Kazushi Sakuraba used this exact tactic. Like give your back, lock up the Kimura grip, and then start threatening the Kimura, which is enough to sometimes sweep people, or at least to make them back off, right? So I think that's a legitimate technique that if you're a striker and you don't want them to take you down, well, even if you're a grappler, you don't want them to take you down and be on bottom, that you could use this as a way to maybe release the grip, or at least threaten them so they might retreat on their own. Kutelaba versus Jacoby. There was a couple of things there where you saw throughout the night people getting up off the ground by using 3 limbs. 1 arm posted and 2 legs, and then using the other arm to control one of the top guy's arms so you can at least stand up. And if you can stand up while controlling that wrist, you can't get punched, or at least you can't get punched on that side of your body. So I think this is something we've seen many times over in MMA, and I think it's the standard way of standing up when you're being when somebody's trying to do a mat return that's got a body lock, trying to bring you back down. But still, you see a lot of people use both arms to post down, and they don't tripod, they quad pod to stand up. But this leaves you open to a lot of punches to the side of the head. And this is something that Jacoby ate a bunch of these punches to the side of the head. I don't think it was a bad way, because he did end up standing back up. But I think if you can control the wrist, it's a much better and easier way to deal with fence wrestlers, people trying to keep you down. Because the way that Kutelaba was ragdolling Jacoby must have cost a lot of energy. I'm sure that Jacoby was also extremely tired after the first round, even though Kutelaba probably looked worse for wear. So all in all, I would say this was a great UFC event for grapplers. There was a lot of stuff to analyze and talk about. Let me know if you want me to go more deep dive into details of fights, or whether you like this overview of a whole event better. Like, what do you guys want to see or hear? Let me know. Well, thanks for listening. See you next time.